I've actually done just that. For many years, I've been advocating quietly in various fora, in closed-door discussions, in open discussions. But I realized that after a while, those really didn't work. They would listen politely, they would hear what you were going to say, but the fundamental basis and ideology of healthcare financing in Singapore appears to be written in stone. And the only way to change that is through asking a question in Parliament. In fact, what we found out was that the best way to get the Ministry of Health to answer a question is to have a parliamentary question. Because every time there's a budget debate, a parliamentary question comes up from a backbencher or from an opposition member of Parliament, then the Ministry of Health is forced to give an answer. And we've seen that when Gerald asked questions about MediShield and the loss ratio, that was the very first time that we actually knew that MediShield is probably the most profitable healthcare insurance, public healthcare insurance system in the world. My family has been very concerned about social issues, social justice. My father more quietly. My mom has been a lifelong advocate for the rights of the disabled, children with disabilities and their parents. But for me personally, what really drove this home was my experience as an infectious disease physician. As you know, infectious disease physicians look after diseases like tuberculosis, malaria, but most commonly today, HIV. And HIV is one of the most stigmatized diseases in the world, probably second only to mental illnesses. And when I came back from the States, I was shocked to realize that none of the HIV drugs are subsidized in Singapore today. Through the efforts of advocacy groups such as Action for AIDS, right now HIV drugs are available on Medifund. But Medifund is a kind of charity. And what happens is that my homeless HIV patients now have access to state-of-the-art drugs. But the minute they get their lives together, they get a rental flat, they get a job, they're no longer eligible. And so they have to struggle to get drugs from somewhere or somehow, or just scrimp and save to afford non-subsidized drugs. So to me, that doesn't make sense. It's just about your fundamental right to non-discrimination, to basic healthcare. And that was actually the key driver which drove me into Marua. And many of the issues they dealt with resonated with me. And so I was very happy to be involved with them. It's a pity that I can no longer be involved with formally as a member of Marua now that I've joined the political party and the political process. But that's the way the ROS has structured the constitution. What people want to have is a voice. They are concerned about their children's education, they're concerned about healthcare for their parents, they're concerned about housing, and they want to have somebody who can ask good questions in Parliament. And I think we've seen that from the last two by-elections, and I think we're going to see that again in the general election coming up. I think what people really care about is whether you're sincere. They always say they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's a cliche, but it's really very true. It's been my experience in the university in dealing with students and dealing with young researchers that really it's the commitment. People can see through it. Singaporeans are not stupid. They can see when someone takes the effort and someone has the ability to speak up for them. It's going to be a challenge. Actually, the opposite is true. That leaders, the first generation of leaders of Singapore, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Mr. Goh Keng Swee, Mr. S. Rajaratnam, and Dr. Toh Chin Chai, they came through the fire. These are people who went through the really tough times with Malaysia, and they came out of it with their heads held high. So I think that the opposition would be doing the PAP leadership a great favor by coming in large numbers to challenge them, to really see whether they can hold their own, whether they can really take on the mantle of the first generation of the PAP leadership and show that they are really worth their salt, the same way that the founders of the PAP actually sort of went through that time in Malaysia and just proved to the electorate that they could deliver. I think compassion is fundamental to a healthcare system. It cannot be about profits. It cannot be about the bottom line. Public healthcare system has to be all about compassion, and I think the challenge is to try and rediscover how compassion is central to public healthcare, and that's what we really need to do.